The first thing Commander Sarah Chen noticed wasn't the massive shadow that suddenly blocked out the morning sun over New York City. It wasn't the way birds fell silent mid-flight, or how car alarms began wailing in perfect unison across 5 boroughs. It was the smell, ozone, sharp and electric like the moment before lightning strikes. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an energy that made her teeth ache and her vision blur at the edges. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cracked through her earpiece, barely audible over the growing rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the UNASA headquarters, her morning coffee forgotten in her trembling hand. Above Manhattan, a ship hung in the sky like a metallic thundercloud. Not just any ship. A vessel so massive it could have swallowed the Empire State Building whole, and still had room for the Statue of Liberty as a toothpick. "How many?" she whispered into her comm. 17 confirmed over North America, 43 worldwide. They're just sitting there, Commander. Waiting. Sarah's mind raced through protocols that suddenly felt laughably inadequate. First, contact procedures, diplomatic channels, peaceful negotiation tactics. All of it designed for visitors who might land in a field somewhere, not for an armada that could blot out the sun. The ship above them pulsed once, a deep, rhythmic throb, like a mechanical heartbeat, then silence. Every screen in Times Square flickered and died. Every phone in the city went dark. The lights went out in a cascade of darkness that spread across the grid like spilled ink. In that moment of absolute quiet, Sarah heard something that made her blood freeze. Not from the sky, but from the streets below, screaming. Not the kind of screaming that comes from fear or panic, the kind that comes from pain. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The ships remained motionless. The silence stretched. Sarah realized she was holding her breath, and in that breathless moment, she understood with crystal clarity that everything humanity thought it knew about itself was about to change forever. What? She didn't know, what none of them knew, was that high above in the command ship something else was holding its breath too. The Hegemony Fleet Commander Zexhai stood frozen at his tactical display, all 4 of his eyes wide with an emotion his species had no word for. Terror. Chapter 2. What Humans? Due 48 hours before the invasion, Dr. Marcus Webb had been having the worst week of his career. His funding for the SETI project had been cut. His marriage was falling apart, and his teenage daughter hadn't spoken to him in 3 days after he'd missed her graduation ceremony. Now, crouched in the basement of the Denver CDC facility, he was humanity's best hope for understanding what was happening to them. "The pattern is consistent across all sites," he said, pointing to the data streaming across multiple monitors. "Initial contact, electromagnetic pulse, then nothing. Radio silence for 18 hours now." Director Kane paced behind him, her usually perfect composure cracking like thin ice. "What about the people? The ones who were affected?" Marcus swallowed hard. He'd seen the footage. Street cameras that somehow kept recording even after the EMP. People walking into the light beams from the ships moving like sleepwalkers, then simply vanishing. "We estimate 10,000 taken in the first wave. New York, London, Tokyo, all major population centers. But here's what doesn't make sense." He pulled up another screen. The selection appears random. Age, gender, profession, location, no discernible pattern. It's like they're sampling. Sampling for what? Before Marcus could answer, every monitor in the room blazed white. When their vision cleared, a figure stood on the screens. Tall, impossibly thin, with skin that seemed to shift between colors like oil on water. Its eyes were large and dark, and when it spoke, the words seemed to form directly in their minds rather than through their ears. "Humans of Earth," the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in their bones. "I am Fleet Commander Zexhai of the Hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. Resistance is inadvisable." Kane stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" your compliance, your resources, your unique capabilities. The last phrase carried a weight that made Marcus's skin crawl. You have 24 hours to designate representatives for negotiation. After that, the figure's expression shifted and Marcus caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like fear. After that, we begin the harvest. The transmission cut out, leaving them in darkness. In the silence that followed, Marcus heard something that changed everything. It was barely a whisper, so quiet he almost missed it. Kane was laughing. Director? Marcus turned to face her, confused by the sound. Are you okay? She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with something between madness and revelation. Don't you see it, Marcus? Don't you understand what just happened? They're going to kill us all. No. She shook her head, her smile growing wider. They're afraid. Did you hear it in his voice? Did you see the way he looked when he mentioned our unique capabilities? Marcus frowned. I don't understand. They came here expecting to find what they've found on every other world they've conquered. Compliance, surrender. Reasonable beings who understand when they're outmatched. Kane's voice grew stronger with each word. But we're not reasonable, Marcus. We never have been. Before he could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights bathed the corridors as emergency broadcasts echoed. From every speaker. This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations. We have confirmed reports of global coordinated resistance. I repeat, global coordinated resistance has begun. Kane was already moving toward the door. Come on, Marcus. Time to show our guests what humans do when someone threatens their home. Chapter 3. The things we do. For Love Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez had seen enough war to know when a situation was hopeless. The alien ships hung over every major city like mechanical gods, their weapons capable of reducing mountains to glass. Their technology was centuries beyond anything humanity possessed. Any reasonable person would surrender. Elena had never been accused of being reasonable. All right, people, listen up. She stood before the assembled remains of the 82nd Airborne, now holed up in what used to be a shopping mall in suburban Cleveland. I know what you're thinking. I know what the smart play is here, but I've got news. For you, we stopped being smart the moment we decided to be human. Private Johnson, barely 19 and still shaking from his first encounter with alien technology, raised his hand. Sergeant, how are we supposed to fight them? Our bullets bounce off their armor. Our missiles can't even reach their ships. Elena smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Kid, you're thinking like a soldier. Time to start thinking like a human being. She gestured to the others in their makeshift base. There was Dr. Patel, a pediatric surgeon who'd been trapped in the city when the ships arrived. Maria Santos, a high school chemistry teacher. Tom Bradley, a plumber. Janet Richardson, a grandmother who'd been visiting her daughter when the world ended. See, here's what our friends upstairs don't understand about us. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because it's what we do. It's who we are. And right now they've got something that belongs to us. She pulled up a grainy photo on a tablet, footage from a traffic camera that had somehow survived the EMP. It showed one of the light beams, and in it, clearly visible, was Elena's 8-year-old nephew Miguel. They took our people, our families, our kids. Her voice grew quiet, deadly. That was their first mistake. Dr. Patel spoke up. Sergeant, I've been thinking about the pattern of abductions. The random selection bothers me. What if it's not random? What if they're testing something? Testing what? What makes humans human? Our emotional responses, our pain tolerance, our capacity for... She paused, struggling with the words. For love. For sacrifice. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. You think they're experimenting on them? I think they're trying to understand what makes us fight when we should run. What makes us stand when we should kneel. Dr. Patel's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. And I think they're going to be very surprised by what they find. That's when the sound started. Low at first, barely audible. Then growing, stronger. It was coming from outside, from all directions at once. Singing. Elena moved to the shattered storefront window and looked out at the street. People were emerging from buildings, from hiding places, from the shadows where they'd been cowering for 2 days. They were singing Amazing Grace, their voices joining together in a harmony that seemed to rise from the very earth itself. And above them, the alien ships began to pulse with that same deep rhythm they'd shown on the first day. But now it seemed different. Not threatening. Confused. "Sergeant," Private Johnson whispered, staring up at the nearest ship. I think they're listening." Elena's radio crackled to life. Reports were coming in from around the world. London, Paris, Tokyo, Mumbai. Everywhere people were emerging. Everywhere they were singing. Not the same song, but all with the same voice. The voice of a species that had never learned how to quit. Chapter 4. The sound of Home Commander Sci-Fi stood in the primary observation deck of his flagship, watching the impossible unfold on the world below. In 3 centuries of conquest across 47 star systems, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans were singing. Battle Commander, his aide Kolvor, approached with visible reluctance. "We're receiving thousands of communication attempts. The humans wish to negotiate." Sci-Fi's mandibles clicked in what his species used for bitter laughter. Negotiate? After 48 hours of silence, now they wish to talk? "No, Commander. They wish to talk immediately. They've been trying to contact us since the moment we arrived. We've been ignoring them." The implication hit Sci-Fi like a physical blow. According to hegemony protocol, conquered species were given time to understand their situation before communication was established. It was a mercy, allowing them to process their defeat without the added stress of immediate demands. But humans, it seemed, didn't want mercy. They wanted to talk. "Show me the communication logs." What Sci-Fi saw on the screens defied every model of conquered species behavior in the hegemony's database. Instead of fear, desperation, or surrender, the humans were offering help. Medical, assistance for his crews, cultural exchange programs, scientific collaboration. They were treating the invasion like a first contact scenario. "Commander," Kolvor's voice was strained. "There's something else. The test subjects we've taken for behavioral analysis, they're not responding as expected." Sci-Fi felt his primary heart skip a beat. The hegemony's standard practice was to analyze a species' psychological and emotional responses to determine the most effective control methods. Fear, pain, isolation. There was always something that broke a species' will to resist. "Show me." The holding bay appeared on his screens, and what Sci-Fi saw there made his blood run cold. The humans weren't cowering or begging. They were organized. The children were being protected by the adults. The elderly were being cared for by the young. They'd established a communication system, a leadership structure, even a schedule for shared meals using the nutrient paste his ships provided. In the center of it all, a small human child, one of the first taken, was teaching the others a song, the same song that was now rising from the planet below. "They're not afraid," Kolvor whispered. "Even here, even as prisoners, they're not afraid. They're adapting." Sci-Fi activated his personal communication system. "Fleet Medical, report. To me immediately. I want a full psychological analysis of our test subjects." The response came quickly, and it was not what he expected. "Commander, we're detecting unusual neural activity in the human subjects. Their brains are showing patterns we've never seen before. Instead of trauma responses, they're exhibiting increased activity in regions associated with bonding, protection, love. That's impossible. They're prisoners. They're separated from their families, their world." "Yes, sir. But they've formed new bonds with each other. They're treating the other prisoners as family. The children call the adults aunt and uncle. The adults share resources without being asked. They've created a society in our holding cells." Sci-Fi stared at the screens, watching as an elderly human woman braided a young girl's hair while humming softly. The tune was hauntingly beautiful, and it seemed to calm not just the child but everyone around her. "Sir," His weapons officer's voice cut through his thoughts. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the surface. It's on a frequency we've never shared with them." "Impossible. Our communication systems are." "They figured it out, sir. They reverse-engineered our transmissions and created their own broadcaster. The signal is coming from multiple locations across the planet." The main screen flickered, and suddenly, Zexai was looking at a human face. Female, middle-aged, with kind eyes and graying hair. She wore the simple clothing of what his database identified as a teacher. "Hello," she said simply. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a representative of the United Nations of Earth. We've been trying to reach you." Zexai found himself speaking, before he could stop himself. "You are in no position to make demands, human." Sarah smiled, and the expression was so warm, so genuine, that it made Zexai's secondary hearts flutter in confusion. "We're not making demands, we're making an offer." "An offer? You've taken our people to study us, to understand what makes us human. We'd like to help you with that research, not as subjects, but as partners." Behind her, Zexai could see other humans, scientists, soldiers, children, elderly, all standing together, none showing fear. "You cannot help us understand you," he said. "You are our prisoners." "No," Sarah said gently. "We're your teachers. And whether you realize it or not, you've already learned the most important lesson." "Which is?" Sarah's smile grew wider. "That there are some things in this universe that can't be conquered. Some things that grow stronger when threatened. Some bonds that can't be broken, no matter how far you take us from home." She gestured to someone off-screen, and suddenly the transmission filled with sound. Music. Hundreds of voices, thousands all singing together. The same song his prisoners had been teaching each other. "This is the sound of humanity," Sarah said. "And now you know why we don't surrender. It's not because we're not afraid, it's because we've learned that the things worth protecting are always worth dying for." The transmission ended, leaving Zexai alone with his thoughts and the growing realization that the hegemony had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't just invaded a world, they'd attacked a family. Epilogue. What we learned. 6 months later, the hegemony ship still hung in Earth's skies. But everything else had changed. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in what had once been a military briefing room, and was now something entirely new. A joint human-alien research laboratory. Across from him, Commander Zexai worked at a console designed for four-fingered hands, his movements careful and precise. "The quantum resonance patterns are stabilizing," Zexai reported, his voice carrying only the slightest trace of his species' natural harmonics. He'd been learning to speak human languages, just as Marcus had been learning to understand hegemony communication protocols. "Good. That means the translation matrix is working." Marcus looked up from his own console. "Your people's music theory is fascinating. I never realized that mathematics could be so emotional." Zexai's mandibles clicked, and what Marcus had learned was amusement. "Emotion is mathematics, Dr. Webb. Just mathematics so complex that most species cannot comprehend it. Until we met yours." The door chimed, and Elena Vasquez entered with her nephew Miguel. The boy was 8 years old and fluent in 3 human languages and 2 alien dialects. He'd become something of a celebrity, the child who'd organized the other prisoners into a choir that eventually sang their way to freedom. "Uncle Marcus." Miguel ran to hug the scientist. "Commander Zexai, I learned a new song today. Want to hear it?" The alien's large eyes brightened. "Always, young Miguel." Miguel began to sing, his clear voice filling the room with a melody that seemed to bridge the gap between species. It was part human lullaby, part hegemony battle hymn, and completely beautiful. Elena watched with tears in her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been ready to die fighting these creatures. Now her nephew was teaching them songs. "The council meeting is in an hour," she reminded Marcus. "The final vote on the colonization proposal." Marcus nodded. The hegemony had come to conquer Earth. Instead, they'd found something they'd never encountered before, a species that insisted on making friends with its enemies. The joint colonization project had been humanity's idea. Instead of conquest, Why not cooperation? Instead of taking what they needed, why not share what they had? Sci-Fi had been the first to support the proposal, much to the shock of his own people. Dr. Webb, the commander said quietly, I must ask you something I have wondered about for months. Why did your species choose to help us instead of fighting us? Marcus smiled. Who says we didn't fight you? I do not understand. Commander, fighting isn't always about weapons and violence. Sometimes it's about proving that your way of life is worth preserving. Sometimes it's about showing your enemy that they don't have to be your enemy at all. Elena nodded. We fought you the only way we knew how, with love, with hope, with the belief that anyone, even conquerors from the stars, can choose to be better than they are. Miguel finished his song and looked up at the alien commander. Commander Sci-Fi, are you going to stay on Earth? I want to teach you more songs. Sci-Fi knelt down to the boy's level, his movements careful and gentle. I would like that very much, Miguel. But first, I must return to my people and tell them what I have learned here. What did you learn? The commander was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that Marcus had learned to recognize as deep emotion. I learned that the strongest species in the universe is not the one with the most powerful weapons. It is the one that can make even its enemies want to protect it. I learned that humans do not fight for conquest or glory. They fight for each other. And I learned that when faced with something they cannot understand, they do not destroy it. They try to teach it to sing. Miguel smiled and took the commander's large hand in his small one. Will you come back? Yes, little teacher. I will come back. And when I do, I will bring my family to meet yours. As they walked toward the council chambers where representatives from both species would vote on humanity's future, Marcus reflected on the strange turn their story had taken. They'd faced the greatest threat in human history, and somehow they'd turned it into the greatest opportunity. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to find another conquered world. Instead, they'd found their teachers, and in learning to be human, they'd discovered something that would change the galaxy forever. That the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or weapons or fear. It's the simple, radical act of choosing love over conquest. The vote was unanimous. Welcome to the neighborhood. Thus ended the shortest invasion in galactic history, and began the longest friendship.